It was a night of some sadness yet again. Benfica against Real Madrid was stopped for 10 minutes after Vinicius Jr. reported to the referee that he had been subjected to racial abuse by Benfica's Gianluca Prestianni, Argentinian player, 20 years of age. Vinicius scored a great goal in the 50th minute before celebrating with a dance around the corner flag. The celebration seemed to antagonise Benfica fans before some of the Benfica players took exception to it as well. And Vinicius was indeed shown a yellow card for excessive celebration. As the game was about to restart, Vinicius Jr. went over to the referee, Francois Letexier, to report an incident after Prestianni spoke to him whilst covering his mouth with his shirt. Letexier raised his arms in a cross that signals that he'd been informed of an alleged racist incident. Real Madrid came away from the pitch for 10 minutes as a melee ensued on the benches. And to top off Vinicius Jr.'s night, he and Trent Alexander-Arnold were pelted with objects thrown from the Benfica crowd in the final minutes at a corner. So what happens now? The referee will submit a report from the match, and UEFA's Control Ethics Disciplinary Body will determine whether or not an investigation will be opened. UEFA's guidelines, for the record, state that any player found guilty of racist conduct will be suspended for a minimum of 10 matches. I'm going to get to Danny and Simon in a second. Vinicius Jr. on Instagram: racists are above all cowards. They need to put their shirts in their mouth to show how weak they are. But they have the protection of others who theoretically have an obligation to punish them. For his part, Gianluca Prestianni on Instagram: I want to clarify that at no time did I direct racist results to Vinicius Jr., who regrettably misunderstood what he thought he heard. I was never racist with anyone, and I regret the threats I received from Real Madrid players. Mbappe, of course, a colleague of Vinicius Jr., said, what I saw is clear. Number 25 said 5 times to Vini that you are a monkey. This type of person is not a professional colleague. He goes on to say on Prestianni, a player like this does not deserve to play in the Champions League again. We hope UEFA will take action and not pretend nothing happened. This is a serious case. I'm going to get to what Mourinho said in a second, Simon, but we're all agreed, and it's an alleged racist incident. We're all agreed that this cannot be tolerated in the game.
No.
But we're all agreed in that instances like it crop up periodically.
Sure. And they're not tolerated, are they? And that's where, listen, I mean, I'm not sure racists are cowards. I mean, they're ignorant. In this instance, when he's referring to him putting his shirt over his mouth, if he's made racist observations, then he's a coward because he doesn't have the courage of his convictions. But to go on and then say, but the protection of others who theoretically have an obligation to punish them, well, that they are punished. It's about maybe the parameters of the punishment he doesn't agree with. But the fact is that you've got instances in his past with Valencia fans that were consequenced and put in prison for racial abuse.
Yeah.
You've got players that are banned. So the consequence of racist observations of behaviour is there is a consequence. There's no theoretical about it. The difficulty is when you've got a situation where one person says what someone else has said, another person denies it. You've got Mbappe saying he saw something. Well, he must mean he heard something because he can't have seen something because the guy's got his shirt over his mouth.
Yeah.
We need to get the context right. And obviously some of this lost in translation. But to me, it looks, prima facie, it looks like a duck. It walks like a duck. It talks like a duck. It's probably a duck. The kid probably did say something of a racist nature. The protocols were followed. You know, the outbursts from everybody getting involved is unfortunate and unedifying. And now we need to get into the balance of probabilities of how these things are adjudicated and the guidelines for what happens. And then it becomes about who's the arbiter of what a punishment looks like. A punishment of being banned from your professional occupation for 10 games, being branded a racist because of your behaviour, is not a small punishment. It might not be thrown in a prison cell for 6 months, and maybe that's where it will move to. Maybe players have to be governed by the same protocols as fans, depending upon what those fans
did. You go with that, Danny?
In prison in Valencia.
Tougher sentences for those who are found to be guilty of racist abuse.
Yeah, I'd be fine with that. I think first and foremost, I've watched it as much as I could. Vinicius Jr.'s celebration was fine.
That's what I thought.
Did not deserve a yellow card. He did a little dance. They've started pelting him with stuff, and then he turned around and just did what I've done it a million times. It's not a yellow card. He did nothing wrong. The lad in question, and I agree with Simon, doesn't look good for him. Why you put a shirt over your mouth when you say something is pretty obvious. You see that a lot. which is fine. That's fine because you're kind of trying to stop people, but they can still see. But well, it's not fine, but the shirt is too obvious. What got me is a social media post he posted last night, because if I'm guilty, if I'm not guilty,
Yeah.
I am standing on it.
Absolutely right.
And I am going to say, this is what I said.
Yeah.
Yes, I shouldn't have put the shirt, but what I said was derogatory. Let's say he said something else.
Yeah.
Come out and say it and own it. Be a big boy. Take the repercussions. Don't come out with some half-hearted nonsense.
Yeah.
That doesn't vindicate you.
Right.
Why would you do that?
So
and the other thing, let me just finish,
Dan.
Jim. The other
Go
thing
on.
I saw, Mbappe confronted him after he found out and was berating him. He didn't defend himself. Your natural instinct would be to say, no, that's not what I
To
said.
remonstrate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nah, that wasn't me. Yeah.
That's where that's what I saw.
Yes. Yeah. Where are we going with Jose Mourinho, Benfica's coach? Where are we going with his comments, Simon? When he says, there is something wrong because it happens in every stadium. A stadium where Vinicius plays, something happens. Always. He says it should be the crazy moment of the game, an amazing goal. Unfortunately, he was not just happy to score that astonishing goal. When you score a goal like that, you celebrate in a respectful way. I told Vinicius, when you score a goal like that, you just celebrate and walk back. When he was arguing about racism, I told him the biggest person in the history of this club, Eusebio, was black. Where on earth is he going with that?
Not into very sensible spaces, I suspect. I mean, he will want to defend the reputation of the club, and we don't know the context of the conversation where Vinicius Jr. is accusing the fan. Might have been saying this club is racist, the fans are racist, and he's giving some context of the fact where it can't possibly be.
He's victim blaming, isn't he?
There's an element of...
Let's call it for what it is.
It looks that way. It looks like he's saying that the architect of his own downfall was Vinicius Jr., and that's not going to have any truck with anybody. You know, he's not. You know, we know that Mourinho is a bad loser, right? And to some extent, I don't like good losers, because you show me a good loser, and I'll just show you a loser. So, but there's a grace about it, and him getting into the territory of trying to be neutral to some extent, but then moving into a situation where he goes, this follows him around. Well, it might follow him around because people are racially abusing him because he's black, and wherever he goes, he's going to be black, and if he has to keep on
he's
encountering,
a wonderful player who does wonderful things.
and so in real terms, I think the first half of the observation between Jose and Mourinho is something he should reflect upon, because I don't think it reflects upon him very well.
I mean, the irony, Simon, is he's calling him basically saying he's an antagonist. I mean, coming from him is just the pot calling the kettle black. I mean,
he's the antagonist in chief.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's bizarre.
Yeah.
He's cleverer than that. He's just making it about him.
Let's get the reaction of the vice chairman and EDI leader at Charlton Athletic, Paul Elliott. Paul, good morning.
Good morning, Jim. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Paul.
Paul, thank you very much indeed for joining us. What did we witness here last night again in Lisbon? What did we witness?
Well, racism is alive and kicking. Notwithstanding let's be honest with you, I think there's been great efforts. I mean, even I was reading this morning to the point that there had been supporters that had been imprisoned for abusing Vinicius Jr. I think they set a precedent back in 2023, 3 supporters from Valencia. So obviously, Spain, I've criticised personally the country for its lack of leadership in that area. Clearly, they're recognising that any abuse to any player is utterly reprehensible, repugnant and unacceptable. So what the player has done, Vinicius Jr., he's followed the right process. He's gone on whatever he's heard, has reported it to the referee. The referee then has signals his intentions under the UEFA 3-step protocol, stopped the game, and obviously thereafter applied the appropriate action. Now, Jim, this is a really sort of subjective, because obviously nobody knows what's been said. The player Prestianni knows what he said. And I think what disturbs him with that is he's actually talking into his shirt. Why? What's the purpose of that? What's the clarity? So I think that's a real consideration. So I think that ultimately, one's going to have to follow the process. The referee will have to submit their reports. And then obviously that will be decided accordingly by UEFA's the requisite committee within UEFA.
Paul, we have protocols, awareness. We've had criminal sentences. You mentioned. What further action can be taken to make this stop, if indeed it did happen last night?
Well,
what can
Jim,
be done to make it stop?
Yeah, I think what is football doing? Football is showing what I call zero tolerance. By imprisonment, you're sending a clear, strong message of leadership and zero tolerance. And I think, Jim, people have to understand when we talk about racism and discrimination, it's not a football matter, it's a societal matter. It's society, but obviously it takes place in football, within the stadium of football. And we hope there's adequate protocols within place to counteract and nullify that. So I don't think, whilst you've got racism in society, it's always going to be prevalent in football. And I think UEFA has stepped up. They've stepped up, certainly have done that, no question about that. I'm very close to that. And I just think it's about now seeing through the process. The players, listen, back in my day, the players didn't want to report it, didn't know how. It'd be falling on deaf ears. People tell, shut up, be quiet, you just got to get on with the game. Vinicius Jr. is a brave man. He's a brave man, and he's a role model for many, many, many players that don't have the courage or conviction to stand up and report it.
Paul,
he's doing the right thing.
Here's Simon.
Well, I pretty much agree with everything Paul just said. Paul, I wanted to ask you about the consequences. Because the one thing that you just said that UEFA stepped up, and I think absolutely right, football has a zero tolerance policy, and it consequences people for this kind of conduct. I think people putting their shirts over their mouths should almost move into the territory of not having plausible deniability, because that's what they're trying to claim, should automatically be assumed as guilty, right? Because that's
I'm with you, Simon.
And it's one thing putting your hand over your mouth when you're discussing tactics. It's another thing when you're talking to an opponent, right? That puts you into an almost instantaneous guilt associated position.
Absolutely.
So moving into the area of consequence, is the consequences, put aside what's happening to the fans and their abuse, that's a societal issue to refer to, inside the game, is the consequences of a player racially abusing another player strong enough? He gets if he gets a 10-game ban, what should be the consequence then?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you have to turn and say it's a criminal offence.
Right.
It's a criminal offence. And like anything else, if you said that on the street, Simon, and somebody went and you used inappropriate on the street, what would happen? You'd go through a judicial process, and then at the end of that, there would be a jury, independent judicator, and you could be subjected to a prison sentence in the same way that those fans were that got in prison for 8 months.
If this were advanced into football, that the consequence for this behaviour it resulted in criminal prosecutions. What would be, do you think, the reaction from the authorities if this sentiment was now moved in that direction? What do you think the resistance or acquiescence would be?
The authorities should welcome that and accept that, because what that does, players have to realise, just like we talk about human players, Simon, me and you as human beings and Jim and Danny, no one is above the law. Players aren't above the law. Players are human beings. So it's about establishing that within the framework of the law. These are the consequences. Now, if players know for inappropriate language, using that language, and I know we'll talk about, the balance of probability or beyond reasonable doubt, whatever test is used. If it's made clear beyond reasonable doubt that the consequences are that within the judicial system they have within their gift that they can put you in prison for that type of behaviour, the same way you can do it to sport, to society, to fans, to people in the street. Why should football not be exempt from that?
Paul, to arrive at that, though, to arrive at a harsh punishment like the one you're describing, you would need to have, would you not, irrefutable evidence. And they don't have that here.
Yeah, well, and that's the point, Jim, and that's the point where Simon's coming from. I'm saying if somebody's proven that has happened, an imprisonment should be within the sanctions, within the gift of obviously the decision-making organ. That's what needs to happen.
But how do you
that's a strong deterrent,
Paul? Do you mic up the players? Do you put mics in their shirts now?
Well, Jim, listen, technology, look at the advancement of technology and the impact that it's having on the game now. We've got to use that wisely, judiciously and constructively for the betterment of football and society and communities.
I think that's right. Should it reach beyond the individual player and should it move into the territory of the clubs and the directors and people of that nature to be responsible for the behaviour of their employees?
Well, Simon, you know and I know. I mean, it's an employer v employee, and the employer has to take the ultimate responsibility for the actions of the employee, okay? That's within the legal framework. And I would expect that. And I say, when there's financial irregularities, who does the blame ultimately lie with? It lies with the people, with the board, with the structure in place, who are the custodians of the football club, right? So
Yeah.
racism now, for me, must fall within that mandate.